to Chapter Select, a podcast for video games in a book club form. Just barely got that together. How are you doing, Randy?
I'm doing great. Are you okay?
I was receiving Teams notifications on my phone while I was doing the intro. So those are the perils of recording immediately after work. But we'll let it stand. How are things with you, Randy?
Things are okay. Busy as all get out. Just, I don't know. I blink and it's 3 days later sometimes with all the stuff that gets stacked up. With family stuff and school stuff and podcast stuff and games. And we're finally starting to get to that point in 2021 where my wallet is going, uh-oh.
Oh, yeah. That's certainly...
It's been so nice to us to start the year.
It has been quiet.
I've bought one game all year. I've gotten a couple review codes games that I've wanted to play that, the companies have been nice enough to send us a review code for me to do. So I've played a couple games this year, but now we're getting into that we're just a couple days away from MLB The Show, which I know you're not into, but that's my season thing that I have to do. Even though it's going to be on Game Pass for free, it's the one physical copy game I still religiously buy. I will still buy other physical copy games, but that's the one I have to buy every time. But then after that...
Sport roster games seem like the one type of game that you would want to get digitally, no?
It's just... I would on every other game. And now with Xbox being just fantastic with Game Pass and like everything going there anymore, I wouldn't normally, but I have a section on my shelf from 2006 on.
Okay, so you're just being completionist about your shelf.
Yeah, that game, just that game.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I have to buy it physically and there. But from there, we got Resident Evil 8 coming out. We have the Final Fantasy 7 DLC pack thing.
Nier.
For you, Nier.
Yes.
We got Ratchet and Clank coming out.
Yep.
We have, for me, Mario Golf. Looks fantastic. I don't know how you feel, but Pokemon Snap is coming back. And this is all within like a 3-month window. So you have your stuff. I have my stuff. We both have stuff we're both interested in. And then from that point is E3 and all of these other press conferences that'll start happening, and then we'll fill out the rest of our calendar.
Well, I already have a 2021 backlog because I picked up Bravely Default 2 on launch, and I have not played a second of it.
Sean has said it's good.
Yeah.
From the little bit I've talked to him about it. So I'm curious what you think.
That's not surprising because so far they've both Bravely Default and Bravely Default 2nd have been good. Which that's the one confusing thing about this, right? This is 2, not 2nd. Anyway. Speaking of being confused, Randy.
Yes.
This is funny because it ties back into me not doing my due diligence, just like I didn't with Dark Cloud, where I just was like, well, I'll just trust Randy to pick. When I picked Maquette, I thought I was picking a different game.
What game did you think we were going with Maquette?
I thought that Maquette was Superliminal. Have you seen any of Superliminal?
Yes. I can understand it because Maquette, for bits and pieces, has things that I have seen in the trailers for Superliminal, you're right. I've yet to play that game as well. Maybe that will be another chapter select because these puzzle games have been fun. But like the Pedestrian on the last episode, I am curious if Superliminal has any sense of a story.
I was about to say the same thing. That would really determine whether or not we pick it because,
yes,
as you know, I did complain about the lack of story in the Pedestrian.
Yes, and that's the one thing with these story games. It's either you get absolutely no story like the Pedestrian, or you get Maquette, which is 100% focused on the story, and then it's whether you get invested in that or not.
I mean, it has a pretty good balance, I feel, of story segments and puzzle segments. I actually think that it strikes a nice median, and it never felt overwhelming one way or another. Like, the puzzles are not so frustrating that I think at the most I got stuck for like an hour at what it was probably the most involved level of the game, which is the third level.
Yes, I think it was the exact same spot as you. We'll get into it and what it was. But I had that same feeling where I'm like, oh God, this game is getting worse and worse. And then after the third level, the game was like in just straight cruise control.
it goes into walking simulator mode, and it reminds me a lot of What Remains of Edith Finch in that way.
So
where
good.
The way
that game is so good.
Yeah, it would combine, the voiceover narration with scribblings on walls or just text appearing in perspective in the environment to do its storytelling. It was very reminiscent of that. And I really enjoyed the parts of this when this was being a walking simulator and it was just conveying a mood or playing through a song to like start a level. I really liked those moments. I also really liked the puzzle solving. But I was a little bit perplexed the way that the puzzle solving kind of fizzles out. Like it just like starts going away, or the puzzles become more focused on general traversal puzzles and less focused on the shrinking things and enlarging things by moving them around the environment. So to explain my confusion for a second, so Maquette is Superliminal is a game where you make things bigger and larger by picking them up and moving them further away or closer to you in perspective and then putting them down, and that's how you shrink them. And that is what was in my head, like that was going to be the gameplay. And then as soon as I started Maquette and it becomes this, oh wait, so there is a maquette, meaning a miniature environment inside the actual real size environment. And then also there is, I think it goes up to 4, right? There's 4 different sizes. There's like the Maquette tiny size. There's the regular size. There's a bigger size. And then there's like a super size.
I'm trying to think if it's 3 or 4. You might be right with 4.
You know what? Maybe I'm...
But I think there there's 2 middle-ish sizes, and then like you said, you have your baby little size, and then the big just ridiculous size. So I think you're right. I think there's 4 levels to it.
They're all nested within each other like a Russian doll.
Mm-hmm.
And the objects remain basically the same relative to you, unless you move them into a different... Like, let's say you've got a tiny key, which is key-sized. It fits into your hand.
Mm-hmm.
And you put it down in the tiny maquette where it looks like a giant oversized key. You can then go into the regular-sized version of the environment and pick up that key, and it will be relative the size that it is in the maquette, meaning it will be a giant key, which you can now pick up, move into the next biggest layer, drop it there. So basically, if you drop an object into a layer bigger than itself, it will shrink. If you drop an object into a layer smaller than itself, you get a large version. Yes. So you can, for instance, turn a key into a bridge, and cross a gap by putting the key there and then walking over it because it's large enough. So that's the kind of puzzle. And then the other puzzle layer around that is one of these colored crystals, which unlock gateways. So in addition to shrinking and enlarging these crystals, you also have to kind of move them around the world in order to open these force fields. And that is a major part where it becomes, okay, I know I need the green crystal to open this gate. And you can't drop a crystal near a force field and keep the force field open.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be holding it in your hand, and you can only hold one at a time. So it becomes a thing of, okay, if I drop the red crystal onto this roof, then move the green crystal near it, it will remove a force field and the red crystal can roll down into the building. And then I can take the green crystal and use it to remove the green force field to get into the building, shrink the green crystal down, push it through a little grating so I can pick it back up on the outside, and then do what I need to do inside the building with the red crystal until I use the red crystal to leave the building, drop the red crystal, pick the green crystal back up. So
and grab a blue crystal while you're at it.
Right, yeah. You've unlocked, exactly. Yes. You'll pull a lever to open the thing that releases the blue crystal. And
should we have said spoiler warnings for anyone that hasn't done that puzzle yet?
Am I describing, I'm forgetting if I'm describing totally a specific puzzle or just kind of a general idea.
You're doing it vaguely. It's just because I've played this game twice now that I remember it.
Yeah, you've done the speedruns, which I will never do. Like once I realized that there were speedrun trophies for every level. I don't do speedruns in puzzle games generally. That's not how I like to play puzzle games.
It takes the fun out of it. But the platinum was just staring me in the face. So
sure.
I will say, like, I played the game straight up, didn't look anything up. I was like you. There were points where like I just had to put the game away because I just couldn't think properly about how a puzzle was going to work, and worked my way through that game and had a fantastic job. But as far as the speed running goes, no joke went to PS5 trophies on YouTube. He's fantastic with his walkthroughs, and basically hit play on his and then hit play on mine and just followed him.
I think my biggest deterrent to a speedrun is once you get to, there's a level called The Wedge, which is a level where the central gimmick becomes, that's when the game starts moving away from the crystal puzzle solving and becomes about, okay, you literally have a giant ramp.
And you're using that ramp for
the titular
everything.
wedge. Yeah. You're using that ramp, you're moving that ramp around, shrinking it, enlarging it to get pretty much everywhere in the level.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a nicely metaphorical element because that chapter is also about a wedge and a relationship. So it's kind of a dual meaning, maybe a little bit hammy and obvious, but
yeah,
you get what they're going for. It's a very earnest game as far as the story and how it's told. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But part of that level, there is quite a bit of first-person platforming in that. Specifically, I think there's a sequence where you have to like climb up a pipe. And man, I was fumbling around for 5 minutes trying to get up that stupid pipe. And I know that like I would not get that speedrun trophy for that. Or I would be like doing that thing for, I'd do like 5 or 6 different runs at it to get it in the 9 minutes or whatever. So I pretty much noped out at that point from even considering it. And that is the parts when it's being a platformer are actually when I like the game the least because it reminds me of those sequences in Duke Nukem Forever, or maybe even the original Half-Life, the stuff in it that hasn't aged well.
I 100% agree with that. I think the platforming is a little bit off. I feel like some of the environments do not interact well with your objects at times. Like the way that your object stays away from you.
Yes.
That distance, especially when you're trying to set it, sometimes can get really, really finicky, which can be annoying just in a puzzle game. But like you were mentioning, when you're trying to do the speed run, sometimes that could just be a headache. Luckily, for the most part, most of those times are kind of lenient.
Well, if you're following the speed run, at least he's telling you exactly where to stand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is something that you have to just kind of figure out here because, as you said, there are 2 ways of holding the object. You're either holding it directly in your hand close to your body, or you're holding it out from yourself at a certain distance, and that's like a fixed distance. So it'll always, and that distance grows the bigger the object is. So like when you're holding the wedge, and it's the giant wedge, and you're trying to pull out the wedge out of your inventory, suddenly you have this huge thing floating 50 feet in front of you. And if there is an obstacle there, when you pull it out, it'll basically get stuck.
Yes. And then that just becomes frustrating.
Yeah,
and
you
also,
have to kind of estimate how far back you need to stand, and often you will estimate wrongly.
And the one other frustration I almost had with going for this platinum is there is no chapter select in that menu.
Oh, that is an interesting thing that you told me, yeah.
And so I'm like, oh man, so if I mess up one thing, I have to go all the way back to the beginning. So I was looking online, this is after I beat the game, and I looked online to figure out like what people had ideas for how to do this or how scary these speedruns were going. So I was like, I don't want to do this and then get to the last level and then mess up the last level and then play the whole game just to do that last level again. Well, come to find out, the first option people were saying was just save right at the beginning of the level and then you hit restart the level and it restarts your time. So you just do that for every chapter. And I'm like, all right, that's fine enough. And then right below it, somebody's like, and I got to remember it because it's been a little bit, but you hold left on the D-pad, I believe, and you hold that long enough and all of a sudden the chapter select option pops up in the start menu. So it's like, even the chapter select is a hidden puzzle in this game. So I'm curious what other hidden things they had in there. I know there's a hidden developer thing, which is a trophy in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find that at all?
I don't think so.
Again, this is only because of PS5 trophies. So if you're ever looking at trying to find trophies, he has fantastic guides. So look him up and give him a subscribe on YouTube because he's fantastic. But in that house that you were just talking about where you had to shrink one of the crystals in to get through the grate, there's a doghouse just outside of that house. So when you go and become super small, so the world is giant, if you go back over there, there's a little crack in the wall so you can get it near that house. And if you go into that doghouse, there's pictures of all of the pets of the developers of the game, which was kind of neat. So it's always fun to see small teams kind of put in all these little Easter eggs and stuff. And I will have to say, this is Graceful Decay's first game ever. So we're kind of hitting on some of the hitches and stuff. And I think we both agree that it starts out so strong with the puzzles and then kind of falls off there at the end. So I don't know if they came up with an idea for a game and then, just ran out of ideas for puzzles. I don't know how it worked, but I'm hoping.
It's weird. It feels like they front-loaded it so hard,
really
where the first 3 areas are just these dense, long levels with a lot of stuff to do. And then once you pass them, it becomes so linear, and the puzzles are much more sparse, and it becomes much more about the storytelling along the way.
So here's my idea. So I got 2. It's either one, if I want to look at it a logistical way, maybe they just had run out of ideas. I don't want to think that about developers because, for one, I can't think of these puzzles, so I applaud them anyways. Or 2, could it have been because of this is a story-based puzzle game, you get to that point after the wedge and the relationship splits, that if you've ever went through a bad breakup, that's all you see is just straightforward and everything gets cloudy and
yeah, if you think about the metaphor,
all of these extra puzzle stuff and all the fun that they were having early on goes away, and then you're just kind of walking through life for a little bit while you're kind of getting over the breakup and wondering what went wrong. And so I'm curious if the puzzles went away because she is then dealing with this loss. They've been together 2 or 3 years at that point, so it could just be great storytelling that we took is like, oh man, I wanted more puzzles because the puzzles had been so great the first couple chapters.
That's an interesting point. Thematically, that makes some sense, and I can definitely follow where you're going. It's just from a pacing standpoint, I think it would have behooved this game if they just moved somehow the second level to the end.
Or I know the last level has some really neat puzzles in it, but it would have been interesting. Because, I don't want to fully spoil the story just yet because we're going to get into it. But you have that meeting at the end of that last chapter. And that feels like the perfect, send-off to that relationship. They've now both fully moved on. They both feel good. It would have been really interesting, not for her to then get into another relationship or anything.
But to do one last
okay, now here I am in my new location, in my new chapter of my life. Here's my new sketchbook, and then just have one area of really cool puzzle making.
Yeah, that's how they could have done. Again, if you start with a big area, and then you do all that storytelling in between, and then you end on a big area, I think that would have been more satisfying, as opposed to, I thought this was going to be like a 20-hour game by the time I was 4 or 5 hours in. Because I realized, okay, I'm in the 3rd level and I've spent 5-6 hours on this, how long is this thing? How involved is this thing? And then suddenly 2 hours later it was done, you know?
Once you get done with the wedge, you were in the home stretch of this game for sure.
Yeah. So it just, maybe it's just if it didn't, it just seems like it projects early on this expectation or, you feel like the pacing is one thing and then the pacing speeds up rapidly with the deteriorating relationship, which we should talk about what the story of this is. So this is a story about 2 artists who meet in San Francisco, realize that they have similar interests. One of them hadn't drawn in a very long time, and the other one, the guy kind of helps her rediscover her love of drawing and of art, and they sketch in sketchbooks together. And they have this incredibly idyllic, seeming at least, relationship where the first 2 chapters of the game are all about everything that they have in common and how in sync they are and how great everything is. And then you get to chapter 3, The Wedge, and it suddenly talks. It's suddenly years later, and they're not communicating, and he's doing something on the computer that he won't share with her what it is, and we never learn what it is. And
I know you messaged me after that point, oh, what was it? Are we going to find out? And I thought this game
was. I thought this game was setting up something. The Wedge felt like, oh, this is the mystery deepening. It's obviously the complication. It's the relationship. Something has happened to drive these people apart, or to whatever the trust and synchronicity that they had, something has been broken. And it feels like it's hinting at something, but it's hinting at something very vaguely. And I thought that they were setting up, a reveal.
Yeah, I do think that they keep it pretty open, just to take it for interpretation of the player, which I think I'm okay with. But yeah, it is too. It is kind of jarring. Yeah, it is kind of jarring at first when you're going through and all this love stuff, and then all of a sudden it's like, and then all of his cute quirks were no longer cute, and and then you kind of see some cracks, and all of a sudden it was just done. And I'm like, oh, but I was just getting into this relationship. So I mean, again, I honestly think I for as short of this as this game is, I really, really enjoyed the storytelling that it did do. I don't know who the voice actors are in this game. I forgot to look at the end as far as the credits go, so I could have done my due diligence for this. But the people that do Michael and Kenzie, I thought do a fantastic job.
Good voice acting,
very very believable in it. They sounded like a very adorable couple throughout the whole time, and you could just kind of tell like you said, once you get to the wedge, that they're trying to make it work, but they are so bad at doing that actual communication part of the relationship.
Which is so weird because there's so much communication early on.
But here's the thing with relationships, and obviously you're married and I'm basically married without the ring, that there are completely different types of communication. From what we saw from these two, we have this in common, we have this in common, I like this, but when it comes down to faults of each other that starts to drive each other nuts, or just, I'm in a bad mood today, this is how, and being able to tell that to your partner so you can work on it, instead of just having a bad day and then not being able to have that good communication to keep it one day, is something that obviously these two weren't able to do.
And the big realization at the end, that we learn, it's kind of not clear early on whether we're seeing the male or female perspective as far as the protagonist.
Yeah, which is another just fantastic thing that they do in this game.
I like that. So just to talk about the conceit and the metaphor. So because they are artists who drew in sketchbooks together, this story begins with one of the two characters picking their old sketchbook back up and reminiscing and kind of mentally reliving the relationship. And all of the puzzle game stuff in the middle of that is metaphorical manifestation of things in the sketchbook. And I really like that. I really like the tone of it. I love the presentation. I love the little interludes where we see their illustrations come together paired with their voice acting. I love the musical cues throughout the songs that open the chapters, where you can tell that, like, okay, this is like their playlist. This is the songs that they bonded over, and they're very San Francisco-ish kind of alt-rock songs.
You can almost picture her going through the sketchbook, listening to a CD that they made.
Yes. Like, when this game started, it's funny because it starts you off in this very fantastical garden, and you know right away that you're not in a real-world environment. But the music, you listen to the music and you hear like specific references to San Francisco things in this song. So you know immediately, even though you're not there, even though there's nothing visually that says San Francisco, before there's even any voice over, you realize, okay, there is like a real world component to this, and it's set in San Francisco just by this music choice. Because why else the juxtaposition of a song that's so specifically in the real world versus this very fantastical kind of artsy garden environment. And then, of course, once they start narrating, you learn why. But I just really enjoyed that opening moment of just like vibing with it and like starting to, grog what the developers were going for, and it actually really working on me. And I love the method of storytelling. I think the tone and the style of it are fantastic. It's really just the specificity. It's kept so general. I mean, I think the closest we get to some kind of character revelation is at the end when, what's her name again?
Oh, you're gonna...
You literally just said the
Kenzie,
name.
yeah.
Kenzie, thank you. Kenzie starts talking about how at one point she realized, or maybe it's even only now that she realized, that they never had any photos of themselves in the house. That they never really started unpacking. That they never merged their bank accounts. That neither of them ever made a full commitment to this is a relationship. Which, again, seemed contradictory with the way that the relationship is established in the beginning of the game. But as you say, it's also believable depending on, like, we don't know how much time. It doesn't even seem like it's. I know you've said years, but does it?
I want to say
how much time.
I want to say a couple times she says something about 2 or 3 years.
Okay, and I guess that does check out.
I could be wrong, but I for whatever reason I'm remembering that, or my brain just wants to remember that part of it. But I again, which is how beautiful it is. They make that relationship sound like it's so perfect. But again, if you can't get past that newlywed phase of, oh, this guy's amazing, and you're not seeing everything around, and like you said, neither of them are taking that next step in the relationship. If you never get to that, you're just two really good friends in a relationship that is deeper than either of you want to get into, and then at that point it kind of starts molding into something different.
But here's the thing, right? While the game is telling us that the relationship is great, it is being like ultra specific. It is showing us, here's the music, here's the art they made together, here are their plans for what their kitchen should look like, here are, their conversations about their, like, there's all this stuff that's like, okay, it's very, very directly about these two people and why they are together and what they have in common and how this relationship started, and it's extremely particular. And then when you get to the wedge, it says, and then they grow apart. And there's just, to me, that's a huge discrepancy as far as the narrative style.
It's a slight discrepancy, but again, when you look at it at a whole and picturing Kenzie going through this book, this is now at a point where she has started to move on from Michael and has finally gotten over that rough part of it, which we saw in the last couple chapters. So this is her going through it. And that is when you're able to go back and you're remembering specific great times, but now you're trying to get your brain to just forget the crap and that
the
rough part.
The character itself is editing out or kind of suppressing that stuff.
Yeah, when you're looking through like a photo album or anything like that, you're always, I mean, for the most part, unless you're going through pictures of people that have just completely, fully wronged you, you're going to go back and remember that specific memory you saw. And I don't think they were, while they were having issues, sitting down and working together on the sketchbook. So while she's going through the sketchbook, it probably does just fade off. And we're not going to get those specific moments that happen like we do at the beginning, because at that point, they're drawing about the fair, which was the first time she's ever been to anything like that. And her picture of a fair is completely different than what a real fair was and how great that was, which also kind of makes sense why nothing was interactable in the fair, which was a little disappointing at first. But this is her first time, so she just remembers the Ferris wheel.
I mean, and it is literally, the whole thing with it is that it being a maquette, it is not really interactive. Right? It's not a real fair.
It just would have been really cool to just have a side game or two in there. But I get it. I'm not knocking it at all. But
it is just a model of a fair.
If you're going through your photo album or your scrapbook or their drawings, they're drawing during the good times. So that's what she is remembering. So yes, while we're getting played through their story, it does feel abrupt. It is just because, they weren't drawing as much during that time.
It's also, I just want to know.
Yeah.
Like, I want to know what actually happened. And the game is not telling me this other than just a vague, sometimes things don't work out.
Right.
And there was nothing particularly enlightening about that to me. It has nothing like new or specific or unique to say about relationships. It's just giving you an archetypical kind of 2 to 3 year relationship. I guess that does make it universally relatable or applicable.
Yeah,
in a way.
I think you're 100% right. The Maquette does nothing new or or original, but I think just the way they package, with anything. I mean, even with their gameplay, you thought this was going to be a completely different game, and they do steal elements from other things. It's just the way they're able to put it together. I think they do a great job with it.
I do really think the puzzles, so the gardens, fairly simple. We should talk about some of these. So we've got the gardens, the maquette, and the gateways. Those are the first three stages, and that's really kind of the meat of the game, where we're building on that core miniaturization enlargement mechanic and on the crystal stuff. And that's also kind of where the break happens. Then the fourth level is the wedge, which is still, miniaturization enlargement, but just around this one object, which is going to be the cornerstone of all your puzzles. And then after that, you get to basically the escape, which is almost a completely linear, you do have to do a tiny bit of kind of throwing some levers and stuff to open things up along the way.
And that was mostly you're holding a ball and then finding which walls are fake walls.
Right. And then you get to the spiral, which looks like a level out of Code Vein. I wanted to do some fighting on, it's like this big, I really like the spiral. It's this kind of giant sky castle kind of thing with bridges and floating rocks. It also reminds me a little bit of, did you ever play Ghostbusters, the video game, that final level? I guess that's kind of a trope in a lot of stuff, these kind of sky castles with objects that are floating in midair and things. And that had one puzzle in it, which is, at one point you find a little miniature of the entire level, and you have to restore a couple of bridges. And I really enjoyed that. But other than that, you're just kind of walking through it.
Did you get completely stumped by the key puzzle near the end of the spiral? Because that was the one that took me. I screwed that one up a lot.
I don't even remember.
So you have you have a key in a room, and then there's a little entryway off to the left, and you go in there, and then there's two pits.
Oh yes, yeah. The two pits. I think the interdependency between those pits. So it's basically three differently sized keys, but they're always going to be in the same position that you put one of them.
Yes,
if I remember correctly.
Yeah, basically, but one, it'll just, again, make it smaller or bigger, and then I sat there forever thinking you had to find a way to put them in the right spots to make the key big enough to fit in this door, and then come to find out you just need to grab a key to make a bridge to get into the secret area to grab the actual key. I'm like, God,
no. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, it was just after 20, 25 minutes, and then you do that, and you go, that's what I had. Going in there and then finally seeing an opening at the top of the first big area, and you're like, I have to get up there.
I think I did that puzzle almost instinctively. It took me maybe 5 minutes at the most.
But that's the funny thing with these kind of puzzles. There's times where you'll see it and it'll be perfect, and then there will be some puzzles where you miss the obvious.
The puzzle that drove me crazy in the pillar is there's a replica of there's a wall that looks kind of, it's like the Mines of Moria, kind of wall pattern with some lights, and then you find a broken down door that has the same wall pattern on it. And and there's some just loose pillars lying around, and you realize that when you organize those loose pillars, that in the other room there's much more giant version of the same pillars, and if you arrange them correctly, you can climb up them. Trying to arrange them in a way that would allow me to that's again where the intersection of puzzle and jumping,
right?
And really trying to get it to the point where I could get onto the first pillar and between the two, and then there's a third pillar that's going up the other way.
Yeah,
that you have to jump over to.
Z's are always the way.
I mean, I figured out pretty quickly how they needed to be arranged. I just couldn't get it quite right to make the jumps. But that's I think just before the keys, and then the final puzzle in that, which I really enjoyed, is a little map of these model European old-timey houses that you arrange to make so that you can do a jump from one side of the village to the other, which I thought was cool. It's kind of like a tetramino kind of arrangement of these town pieces to make a connection between them, and that's really the spiral. And then does the exchange even have puzzles?
The exchange is where you have that one center maquette that you have to move around.
So the exchange has the idea, it uses the maquette as a way of traveling. So it's a big circular level with architecture kind of on all sides with stuff to do. And you have to like get from one side of this big level to the other side of this big level, sometimes within a time limit, because it'll like tick down where, like, okay, this door is open, but it'll only be open for 90 seconds and then it'll close and you have to start the whole thing over. But you realize that the way that you traverse is if you move the tiny maquette model around, it's inside the big version of the maquette. So you can literally just move the building to travel quickly from one side of the level to the other side of the level by moving the model of the building around. And that's kind of the entire level is really just you're opening stuff up by going to these towers and then moving the maquette to get to the next one. And that was a simple and straight, kind of a clever thing, but straightforward and short, and really kind of a one-note puzzle for that whole level. And then the game is over.
Yeah, again, I think we both agree that it would be really cool just to have... Where was she? She was going back home to Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere out east. It would have been really cool to kind of get one level there of her starting her new life. It would have... Just like as a nice finish.
If now she was just drawing by herself,
yes,
for instance, and she was, making a career out of it or whatever. We don't really know what's happening in their lives. That's another... We get the barest stuff about the relationship. We don't really get anything about how they make a living or what their life is like, and outside, other than the fact that they've got a dream kitchen,
right?
That we get to see a sketch of. But yeah, so Superliminal next.
No, we gotta get to your thing. We gotta get to your game finally. We're having fun with these puzzle games, but I'm worried with Superliminal about doing with the story. So we'll have to look into that and add it as another piece together one if we need to fill in a week. But I need a score though, sir.
I'm sorry. Before I give a score, I just want to confirm right now. I'm looking at the Steam page for Superliminal. And it's at least got a premise. It says, as you fall asleep with the TV on at 3 a.m., you remember catching a glimpse of the commercial for Dr. Pierce's Somnosculpt Dream Therapy Program. By the time you open your eyes, you're already dreaming, beginning the first stages of this experimental program. So maybe it'll be about your psyche. Maybe you'll be exploring your psyche. Have you
ever played Stanley Parable?
Yes.
It sounds like that.
I love the Stanley Parable. I'm incredibly... They're making a console, like, super fancy, expanded version of it now. I'm very excited to play that again. That's so
cool.
I love that game.
And by the way, the marketing for Stanley Parable was fantastic.
Well, everything about the presentation and the writing of that game.
Do you remember the marketing for Stanley Parable before it came out?
Wasn't it a demo that was unique?
Yeah, they sent a demo to different YouTubers that was unique for those YouTubers.
It was great.
That would say their name and mess with them a little bit. It was just so good. Those guys were so fantastic.
But yeah, sorry, Maquette. Man, I'm really torn about this because there's stuff in this game I really love, and then there's other stuff that was disappointing. But overall, I think it's a really impressive accomplishment, especially for a small team like this. I am kind of sitting at a 7.5.
It's funny you say that because I came in here thinking 7, and then the more you and I talked, which again,
you seem to be more into it than I am. Even.
I am, but there are things like you said, like the controls got to me a little bit. I do wish it was a little bit longer, so I was going to just give it the nice good or okay mark and be happy with it. But honestly, the more we talked about it, which again, this is why we wanted to do this podcast and why this one works so much better than the Pedestrian, even though I think the Pedestrian's a better puzzle game.
Sure.
Is because the openness of the story with Maquette has allowed you and I to have this fantastic conversation, even though you and I have talked multiple times about this game. But then to finally sit down and like really dive into the story has been fantastic. So I bumped my 7 up to an 8 while we're doing the show. So your 7.5 is perfect because I'm right in that area. And
see where I want to kind of separate to me just because I'm giving it a 7.5. Like if I was rating this as a how good is this game for our podcast, it would be a 10.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because like this is the perfect example. Like it's in a genre that we both like. It's got a lot to talk about with the story, and it was short. We could do it in a single session. So like to me, this is like the perfect chapter select game.
Yep.
And I think our next game, if it wasn't so long, would also kind of fall into that, where I just think that it'll be good material for conversation, which really is where I think the Pedestrian kind of fell down for us.
I was hoping for a hidden story in there, and yes. Speaking of Dark Cloud, we didn't bring this up at the beginning.
Yes, you do need to talk. You need to goad over me, so go ahead.
No, it's not even goading. It's just finally getting the weight off my shoulder. I picked Dark Cloud because it was a game I played a long time ago, got to the final boss, and got stuck. The good thing about Maquette was it was short. So even though I did beat that game twice, and even though I have been playing a lot of Yakuza Like a Dragon, and even though I have started already on the next game that we're going on to, because like you said, it is a longer game and trying to get ahead of it right now, I did have time to sit down, and it took me 3 attempts, but I finally beat the final boss on Dark Cloud with my son sitting there hazing me the whole time. He almost got put up for adoption because the way I play these games sometimes is I will cuss him out and get grumpy while, even though I'm enjoying the game, I'll just be upset over a certain part and go, God, just start losing it. And he's like, well, if you're not having fun, why are you playing it? I go, I am having fun. Go downstairs. And obviously he didn't. He knew I was joking with him.
We know why you're playing it. It's so that you can finally have closure.
I wanted to get it done. I'm actually really excited to see finally what Dark Cloud 2 is about, because every time you hear top 10 RPGs on the PS2, it's the second one that makes the list, not the first one.
So your reaction to this game is not just that you tolerated it; it is give me more.
Yeah,
give me more Dark Cloud in my life.
Because with the second one, hopefully they fix some of the issues that even I had here in the first one.
That is insane to me.
And they will clean things up. Listen, Final Fantasy 2 is garbage, but people
though?
Oh, do we want to put that on the list? Final Fantasy 2 is really, really, really bad. But
I'm
they improved from it. Have you ever played Final Fantasy 2?
No.
It's bad. Again, it was
I'm
during
assuming
that.
It'll be an old school RPG, but we know what.
It's not only an old school RPG. It was during those times where Nintendo and just companies in Japan, because obviously Nintendo did not make Final Fantasy, but were experimenting with their sequels and trying different stuff. That's why Zelda 2 is so polarizing. That's why Castlevania 2 is so polarizing. Final Fantasy 2 is the same way. They go in a completely different route with the way you level up in Final Fantasy 2 that is broken and just not very fun and super grindy in the wrong ways. But again, I mean, they can improve from that. So there are, we've had issues with a couple things in Maquette, but whatever that Graceful Decay comes out with next, I'm definitely playing.
Oh, sure.
And hopefully they take the things that we had issues with Maquette and fix it and make it better. And that's what I'm hoping with Dark Cloud. But I'll give Dark Cloud a 7.5 just to give it a
7.5?
A 7.5 just to give it a legit score. Again, I enjoyed it. I had a good time with it. I get why you didn't. It just wasn't your kind of game. And I 100% cop to I forgot how rough that beginning is. So I don't blame you. I flip you shit from time to time, but I don't blame you at all. Because even me going back and playing it and liking this genre and liking this game, the beginning I went, oh man.
So I will 100% cop to, I did not remember how repetitive Odin Sphere is.
Yes, which is the next game we're going to do. So why don't you explain that? I think we talked about it last episode.
We
did. We threw in Maquette. But
yeah, we've kind of announced it already. So Odin Sphere, it's a game, I played it 14 years ago. Didn't remember very much about it. I think at the time, I didn't even know who Vanillaware really was as a developer. I didn't really consider, it's just another PlayStation 2 RPG, kind of towards the end of the PlayStation 2 life. I think the PS3 was already out when Odin Sphere came out. So it's like very end of generation. But I just remember liking it at the time and wanted to revisit it. I remember liking the story back then, even though I don't remember any specifics. So I thought it'd be perfect. I didn't get you to play 13 Sentinels, so I thought I'd pick something from the same writer and see how it compares as far as how he's matured. And it's definitely a less mature work than 13 Sentinels was, from what I have seen so far. Mechanically, it's a Vanillaware game through and through. It's an action RPG, side-scrolling, with kind of some like farming and alchemy elements. Though I know you've been treating those as optional.
I do the farming.
Okay, yeah.
Like I'll do the farming to level up and stuff. It's just we'll get into it. I'll
we'll get into that stuff. Yeah, we've already, as listeners can tell, we've already started on it. Yeah, it's a Vanillaware game. So if you like those, if you like Muramasa, 13 Sentinels, this is a Grim Grimoire. This is very much in that vein. For me, I feel like the story is really getting me through the fact that it is making. So this is just a little warning, which I had forgotten. It's gonna run you through the same environments and enemies a lot. Like, you'll be playing the story from the perspective of 5 different characters, and then there's a final chapter where you're kind of alternating them as well. And man, you do fight the same bosses and go through the same levels, or at least environments, quite a bit. So if the story doesn't hook you, you might find it tedious. So far, it has carried it for me. I know, Randy, you're kind of running into your end of your patience a little bit.
It hasn't carried anything for me, but we will talk about that. That one will come out at the end of April, April 30th. I know, Jens, we talked about just doing the first 2 chapters. I think we're getting a little ahead. We can do the first 2 chapters next time.
We can do 3, yes.
Yeah, I think we can do 3.
Definitely. I'm already there, and I think actually the end of 3 is a good stopping point as far as the story.
Okay, because I am halfway through 2 right now.
Okay, yeah. So you're halfway through.
I can get through 3 in plenty of time. So there you go.
We can do it in 2 parts.
And that'll work perfect for my game that will come out after Odin's Sphere.
I'll be excited to learn what that is.
So yes.
Wait, you were going to make me pick from 5, right? Or do you have
not
one?
this time, because this one is a special occasion. I'll tell you after the show, but
okay,
it's not a secret. But yeah, April 30th, that one comes out. Don't forget, next week we go back to the movies. We did Sonic last week to take a break from Paul W.S. Anderson, and as we revealed last week,
well, a permanent break, hopefully. Oh, no, I mean, it's over.
No, we're back. Mortal Kombat, is getting ready to come out on HBO, so we have to get ready for that. So next week we will do the original Mortal Kombat, which had Paul W. Anderson. But at least it is to set up for what I'm hoping is a really good video game movie in the new Mortal Kombat. The trailers look good, and it has me excited.
Well, other than the fact that it has a protagonist who's not a game character, that's the one thing that's giving me some pause. Did you see that idiot on Twitter who has gone viral for complaining about the fact that the movie's only an hour and 50 minutes and that that's not enough time to do character development that Mortal Kombat so richly deserves?
I understand that there is a lot of character development in the newer Mortal Kombat with cutscenes and stuff, but I don't care.
But I just think the notion that an hour and 50 minutes is
not long enough.
Not long enough for a movie is insane.
I do
These
agree.
Are the Snyder Cut people talking.
I honestly think, Mortal Kombat, we'll get into it when we get to those movies, but Mortal Kombat could get the Walking Dead season treatment. Not that it needs to go 11 seasons or whatever.
Oh, good Lord.
But I'm just saying, what Walking Dead...
Isn't there already like a mini-series of Mortal Kombat?
But no, let me explain what I meant by that.
Okay.
What The Walking Dead does a lot of the time anymore, or at least the last few seasons, probably just to do with budget and stuff, is they would break off into teams because, obviously you have all these main characters and then something will happen and they'll all have to split off. And then you'll get 4 episodes in a row where each episode is focused on just the one group or the one character in their section. So they get their one-off episode. And then after those 4 or 5 episodes get done and they all meet back up for a big fight or whatever, then you get that episode. I could see that with Mortal Kombat where you have this big setup opening episode or 2, and then you get an episode of Sub-Zero, and you get an episode of Liu Kang, and you get an episode of them. And then... Wow. The last couple episodes of the tournament. That would give you plenty of this character development that all the fanboys are clamoring, fangirls and fanboys are clamoring for. And I think it would be pretty interesting.
So your response to me saying an hour and 50 minutes is perfectly fine for a dang Mortal Kombat movie is, no, it should be like The Walking Dead, show famous for wearing out its welcome and stretching every plot line to unbearable lengths.
One season, just one season of Mortal Kombat would be just fine. You don't need 11. As a Walking Dead fan that has seen the waves of The Walking Dead, I'm very happy that they have announced that next season is their last season.
Okay.
And it is 6 seasons too late. But again, they'll go through 3 seasons that are really rough to go through, and then they'll have a resurgence, and it'll be great. But that's a whole different show.
As a fan of The Walking Dead comics, I feel like the writing in that show is extremely subpar. I really wish that the writers, especially post Darabont, had used Grammarly to improve.
Well done.
How is that for a
That's
segue?
Amazing. I have it on my laptop, and not only does it fix on my documents, it fixes on my Canvas app that I use for school. It'll even fix messages I send to Jens, which has been fantastic. Because sometimes Jens will tell me something that just drives me nuts, and then I send him a reply.
Typing in a rage, right.
That who knows what my rage puts. And Grammarly goes, hold on. There are 6 mistakes in this message, and you click it, and they'll fix them all. It's fantastic.
Yep. So if you end up downloading Grammarly's browser extension and create a free Grammarly account at getgrammarly.com/W2Mnetwork, then it will in some way benefit us. And speaking of that sort of thing, I should probably go on Amazon Music and check if I were, say, to look for the Maquette soundtrack. No, I guess not. Oh, that's unfortunate.
Hold on.
So no tie-in with our game this week. But Amazon Music is a fantastic service with a huge selection of music. I myself like it for classical music because that's my jam, and that's really where the library is just absolutely overwhelming. But
your recommendations for Amazon Music based on this game is Cody Predum, who does a song called "There Are No Words for You" in the game. Meredith Edgar has a couple of songs in this game. And the one that you talked about at the very beginning that was about San Francisco is called San Franciscan Nights, and that is by Gabor Sazbo. So check them out on Amazon Music, and check out the great music that was in Maquette. It would really be really cool if Maquette came out with their own little album, because there's some really good music on there.
There it is. You're right. It actually is on Amazon Music. San Franciscan Nights, Gabor Zazo, and the California Dreamers from the album Wind, Sky, and Diamonds.
So there you go. Check out Maquette Music on Amazon Music.
It is it's a cool service. Let's see here. What's the link? The link is getamazonmusic.com/W2Mnetwork for your free 90 days of service. And that gives you, unlimited, advertisement-free, on-demand access to their whole library, which is pretty impressive. But sorry, you had some closing thoughts on The Walking Dead, Randy.
No, I forgot anymore. You stuck me with Grammarly and Amazon Music.
It's all good.
I will say to finish this random discussion that we have went off on is I'm just saying as a debate to him that saying 2 hours is not long enough for a movie. 2 hours is plenty for a movie.
You can do all sorts of character development in 2 hours.
Not with as many characters that I'm seeing are going to be in this game or in this movie for Mortal Kombat. But, I mean, you're going to be able to... There's only going to be a couple that really need it anyways. But I'm just saying, for what he would like, it would be interesting to see this in a series. It's coming from seeing all of these Marvel movie characters getting their own series and seeing how in-depth we can get with stuff. That's where I'm getting it from. It'd be interesting.
Sure. I've never cared enough about Mortal Kombat to want that or to feel like that is
for us.
But I also just don't think it's remotely warranted by the source material.
But again, all I've heard is that there is a ridiculous amount of lore in the last couple games.
Yeah, but it's all dumb.
You and I probably played like Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3.
I've read about some of the lore in those contemporary Mortal Kombat games, and it's ridiculous.
Right, I'm going to end on this question. Which game has the better lore, Mortal Kombat or Twisted Metal? And with that, as I leave Jens with a headache,
they've threatened a Twisted Metal movie as well.
Oh, listen,
I would still rather, you know what? I would still rather that they take video games that shouldn't be movies, that I don't care about, and ruin them, as opposed to video games that shouldn't be movies that I love, like Demon's Souls, and ruin those. Like, leave Demon's Souls alone.
Yeah. Next week, we're going to find out that Paul W.S. Anderson is going to make a Demon's Souls movie.
No.
But don't forget, Odin Sphere in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Play along with us. First 3 character chapters, I guess. Each chapter has their own chapter. There you go. First 3 character books. You're correct.
That's another reason why Odin Sphere is like, why I thought of Odin Sphere for this, is because they're literally books, and then each book has a prologue, 6 chapters, and an epilogue.
Yep. You're 100% right. There you go. First 3 books in Odin Sphere in 2 weeks. That's Jens. I'm Randy. Aperture Silence, Randy Isbell, chapter_select, all of the Twitter fun stuff. But until then, we've lost our minds, we've lost this episode, and we will see you on the next chapter.